when you hear an idea in your head and then you actually translate it, it was almost like a bit of a miracle, because I think any one of us can say that rarely ever happens.
But it does leave you, and I think probably everyone, with a little bit of like, oh, am I doing it right? Like, am I actually, do I fit alongside my inspirations? If someone like me liked all the bands that I liked, would they like my music? Do I fit there? Am I a part of this? Am I a part of this sphere of artists that I think I come from, or am I not?
Because without getting too deep into the narrative of the original EP, Abyssus specifically is about a psychotic break. Because it was just so soulless that there was no progress, there was no real growth. It was sort of like the numbers were going up and down, and it was sort of,
partly because I think music is one of those hobbies that you can never really kill. I don't think it lets you run away from it. I don't think you can ever drop it and walk away.
I hope so.
Fully.
Between the fragments, fill the fractures. Doesn't matter, 'cause I know I'm
I'm here with Rudi Wilkin. Hello.
hello.
Your EP is releasing in 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Yes. I don't know if it does it count as my EP.
I think yeah. Let's have a deep conversation about copyright and royalties. Is it your EP? It's a remix. It's a remix EP of everyone in this server in Somnus Arts who have joined us in the last year. Our community of homegrown artists. I say homegrown, it's not like we've trained them or anything. Our community of artists.
No, let's take credit.
They are our homegrown, professionally picked artists that we've contracted with great skill to craft a remix EP album of Mortua, which is actually an album that you released how long ago now?
So the remix EP is being released on the exact anniversary of the original. So it's been a whole year since I've released it.
Anniversary. Wow. The 28th of July.
Yes, it is a coincidence, but it was sort of when we got to the point where we realised all the remixes were sort of coming together at a finalised stage. It was like, well, let's wait a month and do it on the anniversary, and let's pretend that was a plan.
I like it. That's nice. I won't put that bit in so we can keep it like...
Yeah.
Keep it mysterious.
Yeah, I plan things so heavily into the future. I've got my releases planned for the next 3 years. You know?
Yeah, you've actually done your whole career's worth of music.
Exactly.
You're just releasing it one anniversary after the next.
I can retire now.
Wow. So, have you planned anything exciting for the release?
In terms of marketing-wise?
Yeah.
No, I haven't really. I'm just going to stick to my usual thing. I try and struggle with the balance of I market something too much and people tune out.
Yeah.
Or you don't market enough and people don't pick up on it.
Basically, so you don't want to be a salesman.
Exactly. So I find that a one a week leading up to does well because it keeps it in people's minds, and then you catch stragglers that maybe missed the last post. But yeah. So I've had one a week leading up to. There'll be a big soppy post on Facebook and all the other socials tomorrow. Lovely. Saying about how proud I am of these lads and how amazing it is that we've come together to create this beautiful piece.
I do love it. Wholesome moment for the community. I did see the video that you made for Instagram though, the one you did with I'm not sure if it was Stable Diffusion.
Yes, so it's through Kyber, which runs off the Stable Diffusion model. So that's an AI animation generation tool. So it runs similar to all the other AIs. You put in a prompt. The more detailed your prompt, the better or closer results to what you envisaged you get. And that's just something fun we've been playing with, just to try and create visuals that attract people that would otherwise potentially have flicked past your post.
Yeah. Quite a lot of us have been playing with that, actually. Not Kyber specifically, but I feel like there's quite a lot of people in Somnus that use the AI image generation and video generation tools quite heavily. I use it a lot.
Well, it's an interesting time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Controversial as well. You never really know how people will react to it.
No.
It's like a double-edged sword where it's like there's a massive push, there's a massive popularity behind it at the minute, which means that kind of content gets a lot more attention than it would do otherwise. But then at the same time, I see people saying things like, "Oh, it's taking away or criticizing musicians for using AI-generated art for their albums," which is interesting because I think the kind of people that are using AI, well, that's not actually true because there are some big names that are using AI art for their albums. But I feel like the people that are using AI art for their album covers would either just be slapping together something crappy in Photoshop or a photo from their phone anyway. Definitely not paying someone to make an album cover for them. Most people I know that make music don't even make a profit off music, so wouldn't even really dream of hiring someone to make an album cover. So I see it as quite like an enabling. The thing is with me though, I use it quite a bit, but I also try and edit it a bit as well. I quite like to pull it into not Photoshop, but like the equivalent of, and mess around.
I think it's important. I think it's important to remember that as a musician, my hobby is making music.
Yeah.
So there's the whole rabbit hole of marketing and how you can draw people into your music. That's a whole nother art form in itself, and really, I want to spend. There's probably a good balance of how much time you should spend marketing and branding your music versus actually making it. But I want to maximize as much time as I can making music rather than marketing it. So if I can lean on these tools that are becoming available to us over the last couple of years, then I think more power to it, because it means I can grab in people that maybe wouldn't have originally seen my work without dedicating a whole load of time that I could have spent making more music.
Yeah. But it's all right though. We'll get our end of the stick at some point. There'll be some time in the future where the YouTube creators and the video creators will have like AI jingle generation that they can slap at the beginning of their intros. And
that's it.
And then we'll really be able to
everyone becomes irrelevant at some point.
Yeah. Oh wow, no, I really like it. One of the things that I think is quite cool about this though is there was a time when I was watching a lot of like the marketing videos, the advice targeted at upcoming artists and how to market. There was a guy I really got into. I can't remember his name. If I do put this in a podcast, maybe I'll put an edit in.
Yes.
Beep.
Jesse Cannon.
And he basically, I mean, he has a massively successful channel by posting the same content year after year after year with minimal change, but the change is literally what has changed between the algorithm this year and last year. And he's like, what you've got to do is have like a month's worth of backlog of music so that you can focus on doing the marketing. You're going to do 4 posts for each song.
Yeah, I watched his video this year.
Yes,
and he went on. Okay, so last year we did this, and now all we're going to do is we're going to change steps 9 to 12, and we're going to re-engineer it for how the new algorithm works. And it's
because TikTok's gone up in the rating, and so what you need is a reel because everything's short form content. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, every musician needs a publicist, marketing person behind them.
I love it,
pulling all the strings.
It takes a long time to go through all of his content because he's got massive playlists. But I find it fascinating. It was what really motivated me. Because the majority of the followers that I have on Instagram, which isn't many by the way, it's about 300. Just on a solo artist. Yeah, it's not bad, given that pretty much all of that came from the first couple of months of me posting publicly under standard deviation on Spotify. And it just so happened that those 3 months were the 3 months that I was basically following the advice of this guy. I had the music made, prepared, a couple bits unfinished, but mostly finished with minimal work needed. I spent a lot of time playing around with Midjourney, creating these comic panels, doing a lot of editing, creating the content for posts. and then just followed that formula and just followed the timelines along with some of the extra. I remember having conversations with you about this, and I was saying, oh, I'm following people on Instagram, I'm looking for these kinds of accounts, this kind of interaction. And pretty much all of that following came in about 3 months, I think. Like, not a lot has happened afterwards, but I would say it really worked for me, the momentum that you get from it. And one of the things that I remember him giving as advice, one of the things I've seen as advice for a lot of upcoming musicians, is to do collaborations and to do remixes and get involved with other artists. And that by interacting with each other's content and by doing remixes with each other and by tagging each other in content, the algorithms pull you together, you share fans, you sort of get clustered together by the big media machines out there. And that's why I think this is quite exciting, because this is the first project that I've personally been involved in that has had so much interaction with other varying sized but otherwise close-knit artists. And there's quite a range.
We have got an interesting range under the group of people who are much further along than myself, and people who are much fresher and starting out scratch. So we've got an interesting dynamic of people with advice to give. Yeah. And listening ears.
And it's interesting. It's not just at different levels of production and production ability. It's at different levels of marketing as well. We have guys in the group that have really blown up in a short amount. I say blown up, relative to us, they're growing very, very quickly.
Yes, it's all relative
for the work that they're doing. And then, there's a bunch of us that are much, much closer together, and then sort of in between. And so it's quite interesting to have that diversity of, number one, production style, production, what would you say? Not adeptness, but sort of longevity of producing, and then of marketing or fan base building. So I think it's going to be quite exciting to see what happens with everyone bringing some portion of their audience, their style and their promotion to this. I have no idea what's going to happen.
It's going to be very interesting to see how the stats and insights come in from the various stores. Because like you said, we've got people who've been going absolute ham on the marketing, and their let's say Spotify profile pages are a lot more prominent than mine and maybe others on the EP. So it'll be interesting to see if I say a couple of tracks just absolutely plow on ahead, or if what I'm hoping will happen you'll get the artist that will bring in their fan base, and it will spread across the rest of the EP, and people will discover each other's music. And I mean, that's the core idea of what we're trying to do here at the Somnus Arts label, is, like you said, that cross-pollination between social accounts and artist platforms, so that someone discovers your music and then they follow it to this remix EP, and then they find one of the other guys' music, and then it then snowballs from there, hopefully. It'd be really interesting to see over the coming weeks how those stats come in, and see if hopefully the plan works.
I hope you will be paying attention to that. I'm sure you will be. I'm sure you'll be glued to it, having a look at what's going on.
I try not to. For the first couple of days, I try and just leave it alone.
Oh, really? You try and detach on release day?
I do, because otherwise I just spend the whole week afterwards just refresh. So I try and detach myself from it, let it settle for at least a couple of days, and then see how it's doing. And then it's like, okay, so maybe we could do an ad just to bump the numbers, or maybe it's doing well, and I'll leave it and I'll see what it does just naturally on the algorithm and on everyone's pull. I really like seeing what it does naturally without pushing all the ads, just to see what the natural algorithm has produced, and to see if what we're doing is working. And then if it starts to taper off, or if it's not quite getting the numbers we were hoping for, then it's okay, we can bring in the marketing gurus, and we can get those ads rolling, and we can hopefully pull some people in.
You have much, much more self-control than I do. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I think so. But I am excited to see how that goes. And one of the things that I think is quite interesting, reflecting back, I kind of wish we had like a start date for Somnus. I remember coming to you with this idea that we shared, and we basically adopted your name and your branding. But in some ways, I also think of Somnus as my own little like baby spawn of that like conversation that we had way back when, which isn't even that far ago.
Well, definitely. That's why we say that the three of us, you, myself, and
Legacy.
my good friend Dan, are the legacy founding members.
Yeah. I wish we had the date for that.
I mean, we could get the date off the SoundCloud message you sent me all those.
True, we could do that.
That'll be a year and a bit ago, I'd say.
But the reason I bring that up though is because of this. At this point now, where you are releasing a remix EP, where how many artists have we got on this remix EP? We've got yourself, we've got Aligned, we've got Venture, we've got Mindfellow, we've got Standard Deviation, we've got Will. We don't have Toast. Is it just is it that? Is it the 6?
Yeah, it's the 6. It's the 6.
So at a point where
Venture's a bit of a cheat because that is me and Dan as a duo, but
yeah, so
count it as 6.
Technically 5, but six artistries, 6 separate umbrellas of music, 5
6 aliases, yeah,
6 aliases, 5 artists. Yet a year ago, we didn't exist really, in this capacity at all, and
it's really exciting.
I remember when that guy was saying, go collaborate with other artists and, work on EPs, get involved with each other's social medias. And I was like, who am I going to do that with? Mm-hmm. Like, what? I'm much similar to you. I had a friend that I made music with for years and years. But
and that's it.
Yeah, but it wasn't even like active in the marketing / Spotify like game. It was just the passion for us that we shared as friends. And so to go from that point now to a point where we have so many artists on board that we talk to every day and get results like this from, is really not something that I would have expected back then. Even when we had the same idea and we kind of kicked this whole thing off, I wasn't even convinced that it would necessarily go anywhere. I loved the idea and I thought it had great potential and I really wanted it to work, but I couldn't really imagine it, being in this situation.
No, like I'd said to you when you first reached out and contacted me, I'd had the idea, I'd put a lot of the preliminary building blocks in place, but I'd never been able to actually make the community start to grow. It was always me and Dan, and then we got a person in, and then it fizzled out, and then we got a person in, and then it fizzled out, and then it's just been. I would say that the start date of Somnus Arts is from that day that you messaged me on SoundCloud, because ever since then, it's been consistently growing over this year to now, like you said, this point where we've got this EP together with all the people,
which is really cool.
It's just mind-blowing to think that I would have created like the Facebook page for Somnus Arts 5 years ago, and the growth we've made together in this year is 10 times what I made in the 4 years prior.
Yeah.
It's just amazing that when you get the ball rolling and you get the right people involved and everything starts gelling together.
It's really interesting how it works. Partly because I think music is one of those hobbies that you can never really kill. I don't think it lets you run away from it. I don't think you can ever drop it and walk away.
I hope so.
Fully. But because I remember though, like you said 5 years ago, the Facebook page and the bringing someone in and the fizzling, the bringing someone in and the fizzling. And I remember producing and posting into the void for years, in one way or another, posting onto BandLab, posting onto SoundCloud, just chucking random songs into the ether.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't know anything about social media. I didn't know anything about networking. I was literally just subscribing to a platform, posting a song and seeing what happened for years. Yeah. When I had messaged you, I remember you saying something along the lines of, I'd almost given up on the idea or given up on the hope that there would even be people out there that thought the same way or wanted to do the same thing. And
Yeah.
it's like when you are posting into the ether. In some ways, you're doing it innocently and innocuously, and you're just kind of looking at those numbers come in or seeing if you get any interaction at all. And in some ways, it almost seems like an impossible game, even at that level when you don't know what you're doing. You're like, oh, that's really nice. I've had 3 people listen to this song and 1 person liked it. When do I become Kanye?
I was going to say that those first few months of making music, when you finally decided you've made something that you think is good enough to put up on the internet, and that's always the track that you come back to and you hear it 5 years later and you think, how on earth did I think that was worthy of being on the internet? But you get those 3 plays, and those 3 plays mean more than the next 300.
Yeah.
Because it's that first level of self-validation that I made a thing and 3 people bothered to click on it.
It is the start of that journey, really. It's like the first time you do something new and you get that feedback. And I guess there's an element of, well, I got 3. Could I get 3 on the next one?
Yeah.
Could I get 4 on the next one? Could I get,
and then the drive builds.
And so there's that, oh man, there's so much optimism in music and producers, which is a lovely thing to see. But yeah, there is also that element of like, wow, how the hell do you make it? So many people making music. But, I guess that's part of the thing. When you're a producer, you're not just a producer. There is some point in your journey where you become something else. You become a support for a friend. You become a mix and a master engineer and a composer. You become a marketer. You become a social media content creator or a label manager, or a networker. At some point, we all put on different hats on this journey and learn about something completely different, because it's such a deep and complex hobby to really follow through on all the way to the end.
But coming back to that optimism you were talking about, I think it's really interesting with music, and especially the guys that we've got to know over the last year. I haven't felt any sense of gatekeeping at all.
No.
Which in my other hobbies there is an awful lot of I've worked something out and there's no way I'm going to tell you, just in case we've got guys on there and they're all sharing their experiences and their ideas and what they're trying and what they found has worked, and there's been no gatekeeping. It's all just been, hey guys, you'll never guess what I tried the other week. And it's been really interesting how to watch my insights grow on SoundCloud after I tried this thing. Did any of you want to try it? Or, let me know how it goes, because then I can know if it was just a bit of luck or if I'm actually onto something. And it's been really great that I don't think you'd get that in many other hobbies where sharing's caring, isn't it?
Yeah. It's almost the opposite of what you say. It's the opposite of gatekeeping. When I talk to people that are passionate about music, it's almost like they can't stop themselves from telling you everything that they try, everything that they do, every cool thing they've ever discovered. It's the opposite of gatekeeping. And the weird thing is, and we did have this conversation once before actually, is how you wouldn't think it if you only interacted on the online platforms. Because the hustle, the grind, the bots, the saturation of the industry on the online platforms, when you are posting music and you get the follow for follow, like for like, bot message, follow this link to get 10,000 plays. And
horrible.
You'd be forgiven for thinking, wow, I have climbed into a pit of vultures.
Yeah.
But then when you actually build, when you reach out to someone and have a conversation and you build a personal relationship with a producer, an artist, a musician, whatever, they do tend to be some of the most open and information sharing and genuinely just like curious and wow, yeah, come look at this cool thing that I found kind of people.
But I think I did the whole like for like, follow for follow thing for about a year, and that was so soul destroying. I think that was the catalyst for starting what we have now, because it was just so soulless that there was no progress. There was no real growth. It was sort of like the numbers were going up and down and up and down, and it was sort of, say, like you'd get 10 new followers, and over the course of the next month, you'd maybe keep one of them, and that would just be the one that's forgotten to unfollow you after. You know?
Yes.
It's like, oh, did I really need that one follower that's really not helping my algorithm?
Dude, that's funny, and it's so true. The one dude that forgets to unfollow you, and that's how you slowly build up your follower count. At which point, you actually may as well just pay for bot followers.
Well, they're just as useful.
What's the difference?
Exactly.
Yeah, but you're right. It is kind of the catalyst, because it was similar for me, where it was the rejection of that culture. It was the rejection of that when I unfollowed everyone on my SoundCloud and only followed people that I really liked the music of, regardless of if they followed me back or not. And I started listening to those playlists that I was actually, I let the social media platform do what it does best. Big data and algorithms, which is a crazy idea. Like, imagine not follow for follow and actually just letting the platform do its own work. And then I come across your music and I message you and bam, hit it off. So it was really, for me as well, in the catalyst of rejecting that whole culture inside of producing and that mentality, that this came to be. And I think the whole reason that I brought this up was I was maybe hoping to have like some point where I could smoothly be like, and that's why you never give up on your music dream. But that's so cheesy and cliche. And like, there's an element of that, of I think we all go through periods of years of feeling like, oh my God, I really don't feel this. This is never going to happen. Never going to get those numbers, never going to meet that collaborator, never going to get that group of artists. But
not wanting to carry on the cliche feel, but I feel like that is a necessary phase to go through. To sort of, you got the horrible thing of you don't know happiness unless you're sad every now and then. And it's, if you could translate that into the idea of good, positive, healthy growth and unhealthy bot growth, I do believe it is a phase that pretty much all of us have gone through. If not when we first started, maybe when we started to feel that despair about not getting the results we wanted, so we try it out, and then it all goes down the pot. But once you've come out the other side of it, and that's when you start having these conversations with people, and you get the mutual agreement that we found when we first started talking of, yeah, isn't it horrible? Like, oh my God, I can't believe that, we both experienced the same thing of, we're like, it's been going not terribly, it's just been not going the way that we envisaged it, and then we realized there is another way, and it is working slowly, but it's working.
I agree, and I see how it works. It's like you need that cynicism, but it's not cynicism of the art itself of producing, and it's not cynicism of music. It's not even, and it's not cynicism of people either. But it becomes this cynicism of
the system.
If I'm partly the system, and partly this element of I think you force your brain to do a 180 mentality flip. Or at least I did, where I thought, you know what, well, people that are famous, they have a lot of followers and they have a lot of fans. So clearly what you've got to do is you've got to get followers and fans, which means numbers, it means sensationalism, it means target, this and that, like for like, build the numbers, get the, fake the social status.
Yeah.
And it's like, why would I spend my time building a genuine human connection with one or two other people that would take me weeks and months to even start, when I could just leave a random like and a comment on 50 songs a day, And so I feel like there's almost this draw to prioritize low quality, high quantity engagement of other people in your art form, in your space, which really doesn't make sense. And then you have that cynicism, which is like, well, you know what? If I'm doomed if I do, and I'm doomed if I don't, I may as well actually just do the higher quality thing, the more rewarding thing, and build that personal relationship. And then you do that, And that's when the real shit starts. Having real conversations with people in the first place, rather than just, my God, let's go through the explore page and find a hot song to leave a like on and a comment with some fire emojis. You know?
Yeah. You got to put enough fire emojis that it fulfills the requirement. Otherwise, you haven't left a comment on it.
It's like a hey, you know, like a hey with 3 Y's as she's into you. 2 is friendly and 1 is nothing. It's like you can't under fire emoji, but too many fire emojis is just cringe and you're trying too hard. You know,
I'm too old for that rubbish, mate. You're talking way over my head now. Those days are long behind me.
Oh, hey Dan.
It's so weird because when we both started, so the whole story of it must be about 10 years ago now, Rue.
Yeah.
And I remember exactly the first day that we got into it, is that we were at a friend's house and Rue had his laptop and he was like, oh, I found this program where we can make music and I've been non-stop on it. And he was showing us like it was like sliced bread, like the latest like fascinating thing. And at the time, we were like heavy into like we were just discovering electronic music. We were, you know, we had Feed Me, that era, right? So Feed Me, Skrillex, Deadmau5.
Just on a non-stop loop.
Yeah,
just
like
those 3 for me. It was just one to the other.
I mean, Claypex as well.
I mean,
Claypex. We had like every lunchtime at school, one of us would use our phones as like a jukebox and just blare it out in the corner of the field. And then one day, Rue comes up to us and is like, I found how to do it. And we were like, oh shit. And then I got it. Rue then obviously moved on to Cubase. I stayed on FL. We were fucking shy. I mean, I was fucking shy when I first started. I think we all were, but I remember really. I mean, was it Take It Easy? Was like the glitch hop sort of style, because glitch hop at the time was the thing.
Yeah, and I'd watched I was watching about 20 tutorials a day about how to make glitch hop.
Yeah,
I remember this era as well. I remember getting into chip tunes and listening to OMG, I think it was.
Old school Virtual Riot.
Yeah, old school Virtual Riot.
I think mine was Savant.
Yes, Savant was good. Yes, he was and still is completely mental at music production. He literally like pumps out 20 tracks an album and is like doing 2 albums a year. He's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we had sort of a more housey sort of experimenting with more dancey stuff when we started, but then our projects became a bit more mature, and then after like 5 years, it was actually during lockdown we both agreed that we'd start Venture, because we had sort of like repressed ideas that we couldn't put into our individual projects anymore.
Yeah,
so we couldn't do Venture.
We couldn't fit them in the boxes, so it was like, why don't we just make a new box? Yeah, we understand how simple it is to make a whole new set of socials. Let's just go for something that will fit the more mainstream, less ambiguous styles that we're trying to produce by ourselves. We got to the point where we'd done a good couple of my track featuring you, your track featuring me, but it was always just sort of like, this could go further, but then it's just a bit of a weird thing.
Yeah,
like, cool, make a new box.
Which is a good idea. It makes a lot of sense. I think that is something that a lot of producers probably struggle with, or at least recognize, because I've seen YouTube videos of people being like, wow, how to know that you're discovering your sound, how to find your own sound, why do you make too many genres? And it does feel like people, at least this was my experience, I wanted to make music and I knew that I was inspired by a whole bunch of bands. In terms of electronic music and what I fell in love with, I remember Glitch Mob and Craddy. I remember the first time I listened to Craddy Android Porn, and I was blown away, which made me discover...
old school.
It is old school. It made me discover Glitch Mob, falling in love with Glitch Mob, and then, of course, there was the Monster Cat label, listening to everything in Monster Cat, and then that transitioned into Deadmau5, of course, Snow Cone, my God. And then that was when I discovered mid-tempo with Rez and Death Pact, who's kind of new on the scene. and I discovered Lawn as well, which was kind of like Lawn. I'm gonna, for everyone that loves Lawn is gonna get so offended right now, but for pretty much everyone else who doesn't know who Lawn is, it's kind of like witch house, gritty, distorted electronic music. But he's not really witch house at all. But you know, Crystal Castles. But before listening to all of that electronic music, I came from a world of rock and post rock, and math rock and emo, like Midwest emo, you know, whiny music of American football, explosions in the sky, Mogwai, Hammock, and you know, Modest Mouse, Wolf Parade, like really, really indie like rock bands, Death Cab for Cutie, and so yeah, completely different background from me. Yet we're all here and electronic producers, and I started making music, and I sounded so different from what I knew my inspirations were. It's like, I know I like these bands, I listen to these bands, and what I make sounds nothing like them.
I think that's the right thing to do, though. That's actually like the perfect outcome, because in that way you're not a carbon copy of what you are listening to motivate you to do it. It's creating an original sound. That's like the best possible outcome, to acknowledge that.
It's good, but it does leave you, and I think probably everyone, with a little bit of like, oh, am I doing it right? Like, yeah, am I actually, do I fit alongside my inspirations? If someone like me liked all the bands that I liked, would they like my music? Do I fit there? Am I a part of this? Am I a part of this sphere of artists that I think I come from, or am I not? And that is why I think what you guys did is important. And the information that you'll find in videos is you'll spend a lot of time experimenting, making mistakes and things that you think are really cool, but other people won't understand. And a lot of the time you have to experiment, but then refine your sound and do something that fits into a genre and makes you recognizable. And I think it's really good that you have the ability to have an alias in which you can be experimental and do whatever you want and make your own music, but also an alias in which you can produce that music, like you guys have said before, together, slightly faster, a bit more relaxed, and a bit more locked into that house style.
It's a bit more mainstream, and it's a bit more safe. It means we can go ahead and we can crash something out that we know is going to thump, and a lot of people are going to like it. And it doesn't necessarily soothe our souls, as it were, as much as making our own particular styles. But it scratches an itch, but it also feeds into our personal projects. So I've got a library full of bits that Dan's either rejected or didn't end up working. So then I can like, okay, so that I like that bass line. Obviously I can't use it at that particular tempo because that doesn't fit with my usual sound, but I'll take that melody and I'll see how it transcribes into my different tempo. And it feeds vice versa when you're working on two projects. But I also like using the other alias to procrastinate, so I can be. I know I've got a self-titled project that I really ought to be working on. So it's like, okay, I'm going to make some new venture stuff and send it over to Dan and see what he thinks, because I don't want to tackle that big task because it's scary.
I think what's good about that, though, and what I also use Venture for, is if I'm hard stuck on something for a line, and then I go over to Venture, and then Rudi will send me something, I think, oh, that's a sick sound, I can do this, this, and this. And I'm like, well, hang on, I've just done this, this, and this on Venture. I wonder if I can try and copy that into the idea I was stuck on before. And then lo and behold, I've then got an idea for an line track.
So you find taking the time to produce someone else's idea or vision lets you find a way to produce something that you didn't know how to do and it was your own sound.
Yeah.
It's like the fact that you're doing it to someone else's work kind of opens you up to be a bit more free flow with how you produce it, which then gives you like a new way or an insight into how you could have done that problem earlier on your own track.
Yeah, because I feel like when you're sat listening to the same sounds over and over again and you're trying to make it work, you hear something new. and you think, oh, that's sick. And then you start experimenting with this new sound, with new ideas. And then with the new ideas, you think, what if I take this new idea and take it to what I was doing before that was old, I was getting fed up with? And then all of a sudden you've reignited it because you've changed the dynamic of it. It helps me a lot. I mean, I think my workflow, anytime I work on a venture project, I'm immediately then working on like 10,000 aligned projects. And then I'd say, like, only 30% of them see the light of day, but then 70% I scrap, but then at least I've taken ideas from it.
Yeah.
That's sort of how I work.
That's a really good outcome, I would say. Just going to point out, it's 30 minutes now until the release, which is very exciting.
I'm trying not to look at the clock.
Try not to look at it. Oh, there you go. I've given you a mental reference. Now don't look again. I'll tell you when it's out.
I do this all the time. So this is like a conversation about Mortua and how it sort of progressed.
That's how it started. I came on and I said hi to Rudi and I congratulated because of the EP release tomorrow. Well, 30 minutes. And started asking for his thoughts and his experience. We were just reminiscing a little bit about how it was to make Mortua when it was released, how it feels now to have the EP, the remix EP coming out, how there's a remix EP, who was involved with it, how those people came together, Somnus, what's happened in the last year. And then we sort of digressed and took a whole bunch of detours onto all the topics that we've talked about up until now. I was just going to say on that last topic of conversation about like getting fresh ideas and then trying something, and even those 70% of projects that don't make the light of day but you get ideas from, that's such an important thing to realize, is that you can reuse your work. Just because you don't like an idea doesn't mean you have to X out of FL or Ableton or Cubase and hit don't save. Be like, I didn't like that idea, therefore I'm deleting everything and starting again. I feel like it's really
it was a lesson that took me a long time to learn.
It took me years.
I mean, for starters, there was the whole, I'm using a demo version of FL, which you can't save on. So for the first 6 months, I was like, I'm not buying anything. This is just a dumb thing I'm doing right now. I'll be doing something different in 6 months. So I was using the demo version of FL, which obviously means you can't save and export anything. So I'd spend an afternoon making this horrendously terrible piece of what we'll quote as music, but wasn't music. It was some dead mouse bleep bloops with the stock 4 drums that come in FL when you open it. And then I'd video it on my phone, so I've got it saved. And then when you close FL, it's gone. But I just continued to work in that way, even once I'd invested in Cubase.
And you could save and export all of your tracks.
I can save and I can export and I can tweak parameters to my heart's content. I'd still just work on something for an afternoon, record it on my phone and bin it.
Yeah.
It took me so long to, for some reason, switch into the mindset of, actually, this can be a project that I'm going to work on for the next week or the next month.
And I remember what was worse for me, a slightly different approach was I started by saving everything I did, even if it was crap or unfinished.
What's the other end of the extreme?
The other end of the extreme is that I would literally be like, you know what? I only save the songs that I really like, or that I think are interesting, or the songs that I'll work on in the future. Lo and behold, when you're working on something for a couple of hours and you've got to go to bed, you do think you're going to work on it again in the future. So what I end up with is a folder filled with thousands and thousands of Ableton files of like random crap that I've made in 3 hours before going to bed one night. And I'm like, oh God, I've really got to cut down on this bad behavior. All right, how do I cut down on the bad behavior? Make a coin flip decision on if I close without saving at the end of the night or if I save. And if I do save, I'll save into a new folder called Finish This Time. Lo and behold, I now don't save half my projects, but half of them go into this new folder, which has now only got 1,000 files in it instead of 2,000. So I go, fuck, I'm going to make a new folder called Definitely Finish This Time, which has 500 projects in it. Inside of that one is Take to Release and Master, which has got like 100 songs in it. So I've just got this chain of folders with progressively like fewer and fewer Ableton
filtering them out. Do you guys experience the late night session and then you upload it to SoundCloud, so then in the morning on your way to work you can listen to it?
Yes.
And the night before, you're so happy with this new thing you've come up with, and you got this groundbreaking idea, and you're stretching out the boundaries of what you're doing, and then you listen to it in the morning, and you're like, what was I doing?
Yes.
Every time I come up with a new idea and I'm like, oh, this is great. Right, I'm not quite going to send it to Dan yet. It's not quite ready to send it down. I'll just put it on my SoundCloud so I can listen to it at work tomorrow. And I'll put my notes on SoundCloud like, oh, just, maybe try this, maybe try that. I'll listen to it once I got to work, and then like, right, delete that. That is never seen the light of day again.
What was interesting about that process, though, is actually, at first I was just like, oh my God, that's shit. And it was just like a negative or a funny thing that was like, oh, I can't believe I put all the time into that. I did actually start to look at it a different way eventually. It taught me a hell of a lot because I started to realise things like, why do my shakers sound like ass? Someone is just distorting the hell out of this high end in my ears. This hurts to listen to. And I was like, wait, this sounded so nice on my mixing headphones. Why is it that on my £12 Skull Candy wireless earbuds, this snare sounds like ass? And I'd start to think of it like, oh, different parts of my song actually sound different depending on how I'm listening to it. Listening to it on an iPhone, my song's got no bass. Why can I just hear the same little melody repeating itself again and again and again with a clap every now and then? Listening to it on my ear, my headphones, all I hear is a distorted, too loud snare and hi-hat, and, listen to it in my friend's car. I just hear overwhelming bass. I can't hear anything else. There's no vocal. And so I started to realize that this balance that everyone talks about of like mixing for a balance, master for a balance, like, it sounds boring. Use a flat monitor. Sounds boring. And I'm really tempted to drive up the bass in a lot of my songs, make things really punchy. But then I listen to it, like you say, walking to work or on different things. And I'm like, oh, that's why that's actually really important. Or even if it's not a mixing thing, I'll be like, oh my God, that was a terrible idea. But actually, that synth is really cool. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I started to adopt the mentality of, okay, I might not like the songs that I'm making, or I might not finish them and think, they're a good idea and I'll continue with them. But almost everything that I do had an idea in it that was worth something.
Yeah.
Almost every song has got a sound that I made that I liked for some reason and that I still think is cool. Or it had a chord progression that I thought was cool, or there was something I did with the drums that was really snazzy, an FX chain I hadn't used before. And so what I started to do is actually pay attention to why did I think it was good when I made it? What was the bit of this that was high quality?
Yeah, break it down to the core concepts.
Yeah, and I take that and then I put it in a vault in Ableton, because you can have custom folders. So I build up this library of sounds and ideas, I have drum loops, I have chords, I have one-shot like synth sounds. And I just have a whole bunch of random things that at one point I said, you know what, that was the core idea of something I liked one night. Let me save that and make it part of my sound library. And that's helped me so much.
As part of my regular process is actually, I'll work on something to death. And so I've got to the point where I'm like, no, this hasn't gone in the right direction. So I'll save a new version of the project, and I'll go element by element, and I'll take the parts out that I'm just like, that's not on the theme of the original idea, or that's not really adding anything, or that's just creating mess that's clouding the melody. And I break it down to the very core elements, to the point where I've only got, like 2 or 3 tracks, absolute maximum. And then I'll sort of slowly either filter bits back in or start again with different ideas. Or let's say it's like, okay, I'll keep that track open because I liked the sound I had, but that chord progression I was doing was absolute bollocks. So it's just like I'll strip it right down to the core bits, and I'll start again with the track. And sometimes I'll then, I won't hard delete. I'll just
You kind of like soft restart.
Soft restart, that's it. Soft restart back to the start, because quite often I'll just work things to absolute depth, and that's a real bad trait of mine.
Yeah. And it takes a while to realize that it's really not all or nothing. There is a flexibility, I feel like, that comes with time producing, where you're like, okay, I don't either have to love this or hate this. I can think it's okay. I can take a part from it. I can make a song, and actually, even I don't have to keep working on it and adding until it gets better and better. Actually, I can remove half of it and rebuild it from the core, you know? And I feel like I never used to do a lot of that stuff. It either used to be, this is good, this is bad, keep it or start again. And the more that I produced, the more flexible I got with, well, you know what, that was an idea, so I'll keep that bit, and then I'll make a new song just using that idea, and I build the song up, and I go, I went in the wrong direction, let me strip it back and make more of a chill or an ambient, or more of a hard style, like, song. Let me slow it down, because I want something with a different kind of vibe. All right, cool. And get way more flexible with how easily and how flexibly I'll just pivot between ideas now, and nothing has to be set in stone. Whereas before, almost everything for me had to be set in stone.
But versions are a great idea, because my VIP of Mortus on this remix EP.
If you look inside your heart, what do you see between my arms? Do you think it really matters as we go around again? While I see the world you build inside my head, I almost taste it. Between the fragments, feel the fractures. Doesn't matter, 'cause I know I'm...
It's actually built from version 1.2 of the Mortus Cubase project.
Wow, so you actually have versioned songs
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you make big changes to them.
Yeah, so every time I feel like it's that because all of my working time on music is late night projects. So at the end of my evening, it's not an evening anymore, it's like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. It's like, right, I've made solid progress there. I've made a thing I like, and what I've done tonight moves forward the track. So I'll do a save as, and I mean, it's my own numerical system. It means absolutely nothing. But it's like, if it's a really big switch around where I've realised the tempo was wrong, or I've shifted a key, or I've realised it's a vocal track rather than an instrumental track, it'll be like the 1, the 2, the 3, and then little changes will be the dot, whatever. So I sort of know that I can track back through the folder and I can say, okay, version 3 is where I added that vocal. So I can get back to that and I can say, okay, when I made that vocal, that really switched the way it was working. Is that where I want to take it, or do I want to go back to version 3? So yeah, my VIP is off of like the very early days of Mortus, before any of the vocals were coming in, and it was just me trying to work out the basic.
Wow.
Really, it was more or less just chords and drums.
That's really interesting. I've never thought of being that particular about versioning and changing my songs and then using the same song as inspiration for other songs. That's never something that's crossed my mind. It's quite fascinating, actually. What you've just explained, though, is something that I thought I would actually answer myself and tell you, and would also ask Dan, which is, you've kind of just explained where your contribution to this remix EP, where it came from.
Yeah.
In the original EP. And I thought I would quickly go through what the track is that I have worked on for the remix EP, and where that idea came from. And so the track that I remixed was Abyssus. And I believe it's still just called Abyssus in the remix EP, but with standard deviation next to it.
That's the one.
And the motivation behind that, number one, Abyssus was the first track that I found of yours on SoundCloud when I reached out to you and messaged. So Abyssus was literally the start of us talking.
The catalyst of this.
Yeah. I adored the distorted bass that you had in Abyssus, and I adored it because it was such a switch from the intro. The intro to this song is this really nice analog sounding synth on this ambient crowd cheering background. So it almost sounds like it's going to be like this swelling, like chill, lo-fi, like analog song with this real retro intro. And then it just stops and it comes in with these really sharp percussive elements and this like really gnarly, gritty, dark bass with this bass line that I just thought, oh my God, that's amazing. I love the sound design here. But the thing that originally hooked me was I really liked the calm intro. And what I really appreciated was the sound design of the bass, because it reminded me of that hard, gritty bass that I liked in mid-tempo music.
Okay.
So what I wanted to do was take the bass, make the bass, the gritty bass, the focus of the track, but really go balls to the wall with the calm, ambient, like melodic, not really melodic actually, but like the harmonic, like emotional chord aspect of it. So what I basically did was take the bass line, restructured the chords over the bass line with a new progression to make, in my mind, what was kind of a bit more of like an emotional, melancholic chord progression. And I mixed that in with the sort of original crowd cheering, ambient, retro intro, so that I had this more calm, harmonic, emotive song, but where the main focal point was that gritty bass line. I basically wanted to completely 180 flip the impact of the bass line from being this like gritty, high impact, like underlying to like a dance track into a completely different vibe and atmosphere. So that was the intention behind the remix there.
So it's really interesting how that plays into the narrative, because without getting too deep into the narrative of the original EP, Abyssus specifically is about a psychotic break. So that's like you're talking about the calm before, and then all of a sudden it just switches straight into the dirty grittiness. That's that basically momentary snap. But the way that the emotion has transferred without actual words of my idea and how I put it into music, and then you've picked up that music and transpired it. It's almost like you've taken the idea of the psychotic break and you've turned it almost into like a smooth waters on the top, but churning below. But it's a similar range of emotion that was originally trying to be brought across in the music.
In the original one, yeah. That's really interesting.
I find that quite interesting.
Yeah.
The emotions have still played through, even though we've never actually discussed what the song was about. You've just sort of taken it and you've taken this idea and how it affected you, and you've sort of gone, okay, well, what if it's like what you've just been describing? It's like this, but it's maybe it gives a different mood over the top of it. That's just interesting. Hearing what you thought about it. Yeah. Knowing what I know about what it's about
resonates with me in some sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a song with strong character. I absolutely love the original. I really, really love the original. I still listen to it quite often. And yeah, I do have a reaction to the original song, like genuinely, because it does have an impact on me with that switch. And I love both sides of the track. I think both are super expressive, and I love how sharp the changes in the song as well. I think it's a really unique and characterful song that has a lot of energy to it. And so in some ways, I'm not surprised, because I think you did a very good job with the story and the feeling behind that track.
Thank you.
So, Dan, what song did you remix from the original Mortua EP?
So I took Vita and remixed Vita. I actually started on it before the original Mortua project came out, I remember obviously Rudi had obviously outlined the sensitivity of the project, and it was kind of exposing the vulnerability that he obviously went through. And Vita was such a nice intro track, because that's what it's designed to be, right? It's the build up to the meat and potatoes of the project. But when you hear the remix that I've done, I've kind of really taken the it's like a guitar pluck. I'm going to assume that's what it was.
Yep.
It's sad but quite triumphant, and I kind of really liked it. And I remember when I listened through the whole thing, the idea that I had, which inevitably came to be the remix that I did, was already there in my head. I just had to sort of put it in FL, and it's quite rare when you actually when you hear an idea in your head and then you actually translate it. It was almost like a bit of a miracle, because I think any one of us can say that rarely ever happens. And it's, I haven't really I haven't changed too much. I mean, the tempo is the same. It's 140, which matches the original project, but I feel like what I've done is add almost like an alternative version of what I felt Vita could be, as opposed to a remix. And it stays true to the whole sort of the darker elements of the track, of what it represents. But then my favorite part, and probably one of my most favorite things I've ever done in terms of music production, the second drop is probably one of my favorite drops I've ever made. Kind of emphasizes that triumphant feeling I got from the track. And yeah, that's what it really is. It's nice that it also gets to be the introduction to the remix EP, because it still feels like an intro track and still feels like it sets a sort of tone, but it's almost like a bit more of a light at the end of the tunnel version of what the original version was supposed to be, if that makes sense, while keeping true to what it was designed for.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my take on it. It was a lot of fun. I mean, I think I started on it, I think, a week or two before the original track came out on Spotify and other places, and I just didn't stop working on it. I think I have had it in my locker for over a year, and it was only really when we started coming together as a group to say, like, look, let's make a remix EP, where I kind of dug it back out again. Because I was bothering Rudi for ages about, can I release it yet? I am glad I held fire, and obviously we did what we did, because I think now it has more impact. But I started picking up about a month or two before we concluded the project. I started picking it back up again and making sort of fine tuning tweaks to it, and I think you feel like you've done a good job when you listen to something you made a year ago and you think, actually, yeah, that's still quite good. And there's certainly, if I had another stab at it now, it probably would sound completely different, and there are things that I'd probably change, but at the same time I'm also really happy with the final product. And I think what also, and this is going a bit beyond my remix, but I think what the whole EP does really well, and it's something that Rudi and I wouldn't say but I think Rudi more worried about than I did, is how each style would kind of fit in with one another.
Yeah, I was concerned, because we've got the umbrella of people that are creating very different styles, and we've got people that create different styles themselves. So it was sort of like opening it up to be a collaborative project. I thought, how on earth is this going to mesh together?
Of course, sorry, because you guys have fully listened through what is about to release, right? You've listened to all the tracks, next to each other,
but we haven't for a month.
We actually, there's one disclaimer to that. We did, but then we haven't listened to it with. We listened to it because I think a little bit late to the submission.
Okay.
We listened to it. So we listened to it all the way through minus the Mindfellow remix.
Yeah.
We came back to that after, but even then, I think we went back to a couple of the tracks and thought, that still meshes in perfectly.
Cool.
But yeah, no, we did. It must have been. I think it would even be 2 months now. No, it was a month now. It was a month ago. Yep. I remember it.
It was once we'd agreed we were happy with how it meshed. It meshed together as a homogenous thing. It was then scratched it from my SoundCloud, so I couldn't keep listening to it, because that's the other end of what I do after I've released something. I try not to look at the analytics straight away, but I also try not to listen to it on the build up. So then when I come to listen to it on release day, I've not got fresh ears, because when you've been working on a project, you know it back to front. It's lesser with this because obviously it's other people's projects, but I didn't want to know it so intimately as a collective work that by the time 1 minute comes around, I would just be like, oh yeah, that's what I've been listening to every day for the last month.
Admittedly, I did this. I'm guilty of that. I think actually, really doesn't know this. I actually listened to the completed I say the complete, what we had at the time was completed in my car. And I did actually do that, because going back to the original point, we've all done an incredible job of making a project that represents each artist's sound, but then also keeping it cohesive to what the project is and what it's supposed to be and how they all actually sound to one another. And as overall, they all make sense in where they're also placed in the EP. So again, obviously, fortunately, again, it's partly, I guess we worked towards it, but obviously Rudi decided to keep the project in the same track order as the original, but with obviously the remix versions in there. So again, I start with Vita, and then Will's version of Mortua, and then we've got Rudi's version of Mortua, your version of Abyssus, Logan's version of Abyssus, and then closing out on Calum with the Venture track. And how they all kind of flow, it makes sense. Like, you wouldn't put them in any other different order. So the fact that we've all done that, and again, we've done that with little interaction with each other, but the fact it all makes sense without that need to interact, I think is really impressive. Yeah, it's exciting. It opens the door to a lot more collaborative projects across the whole Somnus board,
and that's really exciting.
Which I hope we can do.
Yeah. No, it's great. One of the things I took away from there, you mentioned about how even though there's things you would change, you still look back at that song that you made a year ago and you think of it as a very good song. And you said it means something when you look back as a producer to a song that you made a long time ago, and you still go, wow, that's a good song, rather than, oh, I can't believe I made that, but it was a year ago. Fair enough, right? Like, you usually learn a great deal from those songs, because I have those songs too. We all have those songs that we look back at and go, wow, that was a really good song. So what's really nice is that not only have you, because obviously, like you said, you were working on this before even the original EP release. So not only were you aware of the deeper meaning behind the original Mortua album, right, and the emotional implication of all of those tracks, but you took that track, understanding more about its like emotional intent, flipped it into something that still represents the meaning behind the track, but with just a slightly shifted outlook, like the alternate ending almost. And then in taking part in that emotional journey of Rudi's, you've developed as an artist, made a track that still stands on its own this much later, even though you've been working on it continuously. It's a track you've learned a lot from, and is now finally part of an EP that everyone has contributed to on their own, emotionally, with their own styles, with their own touch. And I think that is very, very nice. Again, we've touched on a couple of cliches, but that whole music is a universal language, because you have more of that insight and it gives you a different perspective with writing your music, but not everyone else is aware of that the insight behind the original Mortua album and what it means to Rudi. but everyone feels something in music, and everyone puts a bit of themselves in the music that they produce, and so ultimately we have an EP that is a mix of everyone's personality, and the fact that it works is a good thing, because ultimately, in my mind, that just means that we've got a pretty great group. And I'm happy with that.
Too,
and I've seen Rudi run away. He's no longer here. I don't know if that's permanently, but it is 0000. The album's released.
Yes,
the Mortua Remix EP is here.
I have just refreshed my Spotify, and there it be.
There it be. That is really, really exciting. Right.
It really is.
I guess I'll stop the recording there. I'm sure we're all going to go listen to it now. There's probably going to be a link in the description if this ends up being a YouTube video. And if there is, go and check out this EP. Give some love to this amazing project that has been years in the working and means a lot to Rudi and to everyone else in the Somnus Arts group that has worked on it.